I came home from my exhausting 12-hour shift at the warehouse starving and looking forward to the leftover Chinese takeout I specifically saved for tonight. I opened the fridge to find the container completely empty, except for a single grain of rice and a note from my sister Sarah. Sorry, thought this was leftovers from last week. My bad. This marked the 15th time this month my food had mysteriously vanished and I finally snapped. I crumpled the note, realizing my 24-year-old sister's accidents were becoming suspiciously frequent and perfectly timed to my hungriest moments. My name is Kirk, and 6 months ago I thought moving in with my sister Sarah would be the perfect solution to both our problems. My lease had expired at the worst possible time, right when rent prices in our city had skyrocketed beyond what I could afford on my warehouse salary. Sarah had just gotten her own place. After years of bouncing between roommates, and when she suggested I move in to help split expenses, it seemed like fate intervening at exactly the right moment. I was 26 and finally getting my life together after some rough years following college. Working at Henderson Logistics during the day gave me steady income, and my freelance graphic design work in the evenings was slowly building into something that might become a real career. Every dollar mattered because I was aggressively paying down $32,000 in student loan debt, determined to be free of that burden before I turned 30. Those first weeks living with Sarah felt like a fresh start for our relationship. We had grown distant during our early 20s, both caught up in our own struggles and mistakes. She was working part-time at Dr. Martinez's dental office, while taking night classes in dental hygiene. I respected her determination to build a career in healthcare, and I thought sharing an apartment would give us a chance to reconnect as adults. But then, the food started disappearing. It began innocently enough. I came home one evening to find Sarah finishing the last slice of pizza I had specifically saved for lunch the next day. She looked genuinely surprised when I mentioned it. "Oh my gosh, Kirk. I totally thought that was from 2 nights ago. I would never eat your food on purpose. You know that, right?" Her eyes were wide with what seemed like sincere concern, and I felt bad for even bringing it up. We laughed it off, and I ordered another pizza for both of us to share. The next incident happened a week later. I had packed a turkey and Swiss sandwich for my lunch break, carefully wrapping it and labeling it with my name. When I opened my lunch bag at work, I found an empty container and a text from Sarah. "Emergency blood sugar drop this morning. Grabbed your sandwich without thinking. We'll replace it tonight. Promise?" I spent my lunch break eating stale chips from the vending machine, my stomach growling through the entire afternoon shift. But Sarah did replace the sandwich that evening, along with an apology and a homemade chocolate chip cookie. Her remorse seemed genuine, and I attributed it to the stress she was under with school and work. The third incident crossed a line that should have been uncrossable. My girlfriend Amy had spent an entire Saturday making me a birthday cake from scratch for my 26th birthday. It was a 3-layer chocolate masterpiece with cream cheese frosting decorated with intricate piped roses. Amy was incredibly proud of it, and I was touched by the time and effort she had invested in making my birthday special. I came home from a Sunday morning run to find Sarah sitting at the kitchen table, with an empty plate in front of her chocolate frosting still visible at the corner of her mouth. The cake stand held nothing but crumbs, and one sad deflated rose made of frosting. "Sarah, what happened to my birthday cake?" She looked up with glazed eyes like someone waking up from a deep sleep. "Oh no, Kirk. I think I was sleepwalking again. I have this condition where I eat in my sleep when I'm really stressed. I'm so sorry I didn't even realize what I was doing." The sleepwalking excuse was new, and something about her delivery felt rehearsed. But I had never heard of sleep eating being a real condition, so I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Amy was devastated when I told her what happened, but she graciously offered to make another cake. I declined, not wanting to put her through that effort again, but the damage to my birthday celebration was done. After that, Sarah's accidents developed a disturbing pattern. They always happened on my longest work days when I was most exhausted and hungry. They always involved my favorite foods, or the most expensive items in our shared refrigerator. And her excuses became increasingly creative and elaborate. I thought it was community food. My blood sugar crashed and I got confused. I was having a panic attack and stress eating. I forgot which things were yours and which were mine. Each explanation sounded reasonable in isolation, but together they painted a picture that made me uncomfortable. I started keeping detailed mental notes of what disappeared and when, and the timing was too convenient to be coincidental. I began taking precautions that felt ridiculous but seemed necessary. I started labeling everything in the refrigerator with my name and the date. I moved my special foods to the back of shelves hidden behind condiments and vegetables that Sarah never touched. I even bought a small mini fridge for my bedroom, but Sarah complained that it made too much noise and kept her awake at night, so I returned it. The breaking point came on a particularly brutal Friday in October. I had worked a double shift because 2 coworkers called in sick, spending 14 hours loading trucks in the warehouse. My back ached, my hands were raw from handling packages, and I had eaten nothing but a granola bar since 6 that morning. All day I fantasized about the leftover General Tso's chicken and fried rice waiting for me at home. I had specifically asked Sarah not to touch it because it was all the food I had left until my next paycheck. But when I opened that container and saw nothing but that single grain of rice mocking me, something inside me finally snapped. I examined Sarah's note more carefully, noticing that her handwriting looked perfectly steady, not like someone who had been confused or stressed. The paper wasn't even wrinkled, suggesting she had written it carefully and deliberately. That's when I decided to test my theory. The next morning, I prepared a turkey sandwich with all the fixings and hid it in the very back of the refrigerator behind a jar of pickles that had been unopened for months. Before leaving for work, I set up my old smartphone as a hidden camera, using an app that would record movement in the kitchen and send alerts to my work phone. Around 2 in the afternoon, I received a motion alert. During my break, I reviewed the footage and felt my stomach drop. The video showed Sarah entering the kitchen around noon, not with the confused or desperate demeanor of someone having a medical episode, but with the purposeful movements of someone conducting a thorough search. She systematically opened every drawer and cabinet, moved items around in the refrigerator, and eventually found my hidden sandwich. But what made my blood boil was watching her laugh while reading something on her phone as she ate my food. She took her time savoring each bite, occasionally pausing to type responses to whoever was texting her. This wasn't absent-mindedness or a medical condition. This was deliberate theft, and she had been lying to my face for months. Even worse, she seemed to be enjoying not just my food, but the game of deceiving me. I sat in my truck in the Henderson Logistics parking lot, watching that video over and over, feeling betrayed in a way I had never experienced before. This was my sister, someone I trusted completely, someone I had opened my home to when she needed help. And she had been systematically stealing from me while crafting elaborate lies to cover her tracks. The realization that Sarah had been playing me for a fool was more painful than the hunger, more expensive than the wasted groceries, and more infuriating than all her fake apologies combined. My own sister had turned our shared home into a battlefield where I was fighting an enemy who pretended to be on my side. The weekend after discovering Sarah's deception, I transformed into a detective in my own home. I couldn't confront her with just one piece of evidence because I knew she would find a way to explain it away or make me feel guilty for not trusting her. I needed an airtight case that would make her manipulation impossible to deny. I invested $67 I could barely afford in a small security camera system, telling Sarah I was concerned about package theft in our building. The cameras gave me multiple angles of our kitchen and living area, and I could monitor the feeds from my phone during work hours. I also started keeping a detailed spreadsheet of every food item I purchased, when I bought it, and when it disappeared. For the first week of my investigation, Sarah's behavior was angelic. No food went missing. She contributed to a shared grocery run, and she even cooked dinner for both of us twice. We watched movies together in the evenings, and for a brief moment I wondered if I had been paranoid and unfair in my suspicions. "I've been thinking about what you said regarding the food mix-ups," Sarah mentioned during one of our movie nights, curled up on the opposite end of our second-hand couch. "I think I might have been stress eating without realizing it. School has been really overwhelming, and sometimes I zone out when I'm anxious." Her admission seemed heartfelt and vulnerable. She went on to explain that her program at the community college was more demanding than she had expected, and her supervisor at the dental office had been critical of her work lately. She painted a picture of someone struggling to keep up with adult responsibilities while battling anxiety and depression. "I never meant to take your food specifically, Kirk. I think I was just grabbing whatever was convenient when I felt overwhelmed. I know that's not an excuse, but I want you to understand it wasn't malicious." I felt terrible for doubting her. Here was my sister opening up about her mental health struggles, and I had been secretly recording her like she was a criminal. We talked late into the night about our childhood, our fears about the future, and the pressure we both felt to succeed as young adults. For the first time in years, we connected on a deep level. Sarah promised to be more mindful about food boundaries, and she suggested we create a system where shared meals were clearly marked and personal meals were respected. She even offered to contribute more to the grocery budget once her next student loan disbursement came through. The peace lasted exactly 14 days. On a Tuesday evening, I came home early from work because a power outage had shut down the warehouse operations. I expected to find Sarah at her evening class, but as I climbed the stairs to our second-floor apartment, I heard voices and laughter coming from inside. I paused outside our door, key in hand, listening to a conversation that made my blood turn cold. "Make sure you don't touch anything in the blue containers," Sarah's voice carried clearly through the thin walls. "That's Kirk's meal prep, and he tracks everything like he's running a laboratory. He actually has a spreadsheet." A male voice I didn't recognize laughed. "Seriously, your brother sounds like a control freak who keeps a spreadsheet for food. You have no idea. He labels everything with dates and his name like we're in a college dorm or something. It's honestly embarrassing to live with someone so uptight about sharing." My hand tightened around my keys as I realized what I was hearing. Not only was there a stranger in our apartment without my knowledge, but Sarah was mocking me for trying to protect my own food from her theft. "Well, lucky for me, this free meal plan is working out perfectly," the male voice continued. "These steaks look incredible. Did your brother seriously buy prime rib for himself?" "Oh, those aren't just for him. Kirk's got this anniversary dinner planned with his girlfriend tonight. He's been talking about it for weeks, bought all these expensive ingredients to cook something special for her." The anniversary dinner. I had been planning for 3 weeks to recreate the meal Amy and I shared on our first date, spending nearly $80 on high-quality ingredients I normally couldn't afford. The steaks alone had cost $42, and I had been looking forward to this evening for weeks. Even better," the stranger said. "Nothing tastes better than food someone else paid for." Their laughter felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I stood frozen outside my own door, listening to my sister and her unknown companion casually destroying something I had planned and saved for. But more than that, I was hearing Sarah's true feelings about me for the first time. I wasn't her brother struggling to make ends meet while supporting both of us. I was a control freak and uptight for not wanting my food stolen. My reasonable attempts to protect my property were embarrassing and worthy of mockery. I quietly inserted my key and opened the door as softly as possible. The voices came from our kitchen around the corner from the entryway, giving me a moment to process the scene before they noticed me. Sarah was standing at our small kitchen island with a tall, thin man I had never seen before. He appeared to be in his late 20s with carefully styled brown hair and an expensive-looking leather jacket draped over one of our chairs. The remains of my anniversary dinner were spread across the counter: empty steak packages, my special marinade ingredients, and the bottle of wine Amy's father had given me from his personal collection. The stranger was cutting into one of my steaks with casual confidence, like he owned the place. Sarah was plating roasted vegetables I had prepped that morning, both of them completely at ease in my kitchen, eating my food, ruining my plans. "This marinade is fantastic," the man said, taking another bite. "Your brother actually knows how to cook. Tyler, you should see him on Sunday mornings. He spends like 3 hours preparing meals for the week, measuring everything with a scale, like he's a pharmacist. It's actually kind of sad how seriously he takes it." Tyler. So the stranger had a name and apparently knew details about my weekly routines. How long had this been going on? How many times had Sarah brought this person into our home without telling me? I stood there for nearly 10 minutes listening to them dissect my personality while devouring the ingredients for what was supposed to be a romantic evening with Amy. Tyler made jokes about my paranoid labeling system, and Sarah laughed along, adding details about my work schedule and financial situation that she had no right to share with a stranger. The betrayal was so complete and devastating that I couldn't even feel angry. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides and left me standing there as an empty shell. This wasn't just about food anymore. This was about trust, respect, and the fundamental foundation of our sibling relationship. I quietly backed out of the apartment and sat in my truck in the parking lot, trying to figure out what to do next. In 3 hours, Amy would arrive expecting a beautiful anniversary dinner, and I had nothing to offer her except the truth about how thoroughly my sister had played me for a fool. But as I sat there, something else occurred to me. If Sarah was comfortable bringing Tyler into our apartment without my knowledge, comfortable enough that he knew my routines and schedules, then this wasn't a new relationship. This had been going on for weeks, or maybe months, which meant Tyler had been essentially living in my apartment rent-free while eating my food. I wasn't just dealing with a sister who occasionally stole my leftovers. I was dealing with two people who saw me as a resource to exploit, while mocking me for trying to protect myself. The game had changed completely, and I realized I needed to know exactly who Tyler was and what I was really up against. Instead of confronting Sarah and Tyler immediately, I decided to gather more intelligence about what I was dealing with. I drove around the block a few times to calm down, then returned to the apartment building and waited in the lobby where I could see our kitchen window. After about 45 minutes, I watched Tyler leave through the back exit, confirming my suspicion that he had been using the fire escape to avoid being seen by other tenants. Once I was sure he was gone, I entered the apartment to find Sarah cleaning up the evidence of their feast. She looked startled when I walked in, clearly not expecting me home this early. "Kirk, you scared me. I thought you were working until 7 tonight." Power went out at the warehouse, I said, keeping my voice neutral while surveying the damage. Every expensive ingredient I had purchased for the anniversary dinner was gone. The empty wine bottle sat in the recycling bin, and I could smell the lingering aroma of perfectly cooked steak in the air. "Oh no, what happened to all your anniversary dinner ingredients?" Sarah asked, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I swear they were here this morning." I stared at her for a long moment, marveling at how smoothly she could lie to my face. There were still crumbs on the counter from the artisanal bread I had bought, and I could see traces of my expensive olive oil on the cutting board. "That's strange," I replied, matching her tone. "I was really looking forward to cooking for Amy tonight. Maybe someone broke in. We should check if anything else is missing." The audacity was breathtaking. Sarah was standing 3 feet away from me, suggesting we investigate a burglary she had committed herself less than an hour ago. I realized in that moment that my sister wasn't just a casual food thief. She was a skilled manipulator who could lie without any visible tells. "You're right, let me look around," I said, playing along with her charade while mentally cataloging everything I had lost. Over the next hour, I discovered the full extent of what had been happening in my apartment. My expensive coffee pods, which I bought as a small luxury to help get through early morning shifts, were nearly gone. The protein powder I used for post-workout smoothies was half empty despite being new 3 days ago. Even my vitamins and supplements had been depleted much faster than they should have been. In Tyler's rush to leave, he had forgotten his phone charger, which was plugged into an outlet near our kitchen table. It was an expensive wireless charging pad that definitely didn't belong to Sarah. When I mentioned finding it, Sarah quickly claimed it was hers, a recent purchase she was still getting used to. But the most disturbing discovery came when I was cleaning the bathroom later that evening. Hidden behind our toilet was a prescription medication bottle with Tyler's full name, Tyler James Morrison. The address listed was our apartment, which meant he had been using our address for official mail without my knowledge or consent. I photographed the prescription bottle before replacing it exactly where I found it, then spent the evening researching Tyler Morrison online. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Tyler had a significant social media presence, but his posts painted a troubling picture. His relationship status had been listed as single until just 2 months ago, despite Sarah claiming they had been dating since spring. More concerning were his location tags, which showed him in 3 different cities over the past year, always posting from someone else's apartment or house. His Facebook friends list was almost exclusively young women, and when I looked through his photos, I noticed a pattern. Tyler appeared in domestic settings with different women every few months, cooking in their kitchens, relaxing in their living rooms, always looking comfortable and at home. But none of these women appeared in his more recent posts, suggesting a pattern of short-term relationships that ended abruptly. I found a review website where 2 women had left warnings about Tyler, describing him as a serial moocher who moved in with girlfriends quickly and then disappeared when they caught on to his behavior. One woman mentioned expensive groceries going missing, another talked about him using her address for official documents without permission. The reviews were from different cities matching the locations in Tyler's social media history. He appeared to be someone who systematically targeted women with stable housing and income, embedded himself in their lives, exploited their resources, and moved on when the situation became unsustainable. Sarah wasn't just dating a food thief. She was involved with someone who made a lifestyle out of exploiting trusting women. When Amy arrived for our anniversary dinner, I had to explain that our plans had been ruined. I didn't tell her the full truth because I didn't want to burden her with my family drama, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She suggested we could order pizza and make the best of it, but my mood was too dark for salvage attempts. "Is everything okay, Kirk? You seem really stressed lately," Amy said, as we sat on the couch sharing mediocre takeout pizza instead of the romantic meal I had planned. "Just work stuff." I lied, not wanting to explain that my sister was systematically destroying my ability to provide for myself, let alone plan special evenings for the people I cared about. Amy was understanding, but I could tell she was worried about me. My stress was starting to affect our relationship, making me withdrawn and irritable. I was constantly on edge, never knowing when I would come home to find my food gone or discover new evidence of Tyler's presence in my home. The situation was affecting my work performance too. I was frequently hungry during shifts because my planned meals kept disappearing, making me sluggish and unable to concentrate. My supervisor, Janet, pulled me aside during Thursday's shift to ask if everything was all right at home. "Your productivity numbers are down this month, Kirk. You've always been one of our most reliable employees, but lately you seem distracted. Is there anything the company can do to help?" I appreciated Janet's concern, but I couldn't exactly explain that my living situation had devolved into psychological warfare with my own sister. I assured her I would improve my focus, but I knew the problem would persist as long as Tyler was in the picture. That evening, I decided to search Tyler's name in local court records and news databases. What I found made me realize the situation was far more serious than food theft or even mail fraud. Tyler James Morrison had outstanding warrants in 2 other states for identity theft, credit card fraud, and theft of services. In Colorado, he had been accused of stealing over $15,000 from a girlfriend by using her personal information to open credit accounts. In Nevada, he had been charged with using a different woman's address and identity to secure an apartment lease then disappearing without paying rent, leaving her liable for thousands of dollars in damages. The charges were serious enough that if convicted, Tyler could face several years in prison. More importantly, for my immediate situation, his presence in my apartment meant I could potentially be charged as an accessory if he was conducting illegal activities from our address. I was no longer dealing with a lazy boyfriend who ate my food. I was dealing with a career criminal who specialized in financial fraud, and my sister was either his willing accomplice or his latest victim. Either way, my own legal and financial security was now at risk because of Tyler's presence in my home. The prescription bottle with our address was evidence of mail fraud, a federal crime. If Tyler was using our apartment to receive documents for identity theft schemes, I could be investigated as a co-conspirator. My job at Henderson Logistics required a clean criminal background check, which meant even being investigated for financial crimes could cost me my career. As I sat in my room that night staring at the evidence I had gathered, I realized my simple food theft problem had evolved into something that could destroy my entire future. Tyler wasn't just stealing my steaks. He was potentially stealing my livelihood, my legal standing, and my financial security. And Sarah, whether she knew it or not, had invited this danger directly into our home. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 8 months. I needed answers about Tyler Morrison, and I couldn't afford to wait for my next day off. I spent the entire Friday researching everything I could find about the man who had been living in my apartment without my knowledge. Using the information from his prescription bottle and social media profiles, I was able to piece together a disturbing pattern that stretched back over 3 years. Tyler's method was sophisticated and calculated. He would meet women through dating apps or social situations, present himself as temporarily between apartments due to work relocations or family emergencies, and gradually move into their homes under the guise of short-term necessity. Once established in their living situations, Tyler would begin the exploitation phase. He would use their addresses for mail, their kitchens for food, their internet for personal business, and their emotional attachment to him as leverage to prevent them from setting boundaries. When his victims began questioning the arrangement or demanding he contribute financially, Tyler would create dramatic scenarios to distract them. Family emergencies that required his money job opportunities that were just about to materialize, or emotional crises that made him temporarily unable to handle practical responsibilities. I found forum posts from 5 different women across 4 states describing nearly identical experiences with Tyler. The details were so consistent they could have been written from the same script. Tyler was charming and attentive during the initial dating phase, gradually revealed housing instability that tugged at their heartstrings, moved in temporarily with promises of financial contribution. Once his situation stabilized, then systematically exploited their resources while isolating them from friends and family who might question the arrangement. The most chilling part of my research was discovering how Tyler manipulated his victims psychologically. According to the women who had shared their experiences online, Tyler was expert at gaslighting. He would take small actions that benefited him, then convince his girlfriends those actions had been their ideas. He would create financial emergencies that required his victims to support him, then frame their assistance as evidence of their love and commitment. Most devastatingly, Tyler was skilled at turning his victims against their own support systems. He would interpret every expression of concern from their friends and family as jealousy, control, or interference. He would convince the women that people who questioned their relationship were trying to sabotage their happiness. Reading these accounts, I realized exactly what had been happening with Sarah. Her defensive reaction when I expressed concerns about Tyler, her sudden distance from our parents, her unwillingness to discuss her relationship in detail, all of it fit Tyler's documented pattern of isolation and manipulation. But I also realized Sarah might be in more danger than I initially understood. 2 of the women who posted about Tyler mentioned that he became hostile and threatening when he felt his position was threatened. One woman had to get a restraining order after Tyler destroyed her property and threatened her when she tried to break up with him. Another mentioned that Tyler had stolen her identity documents and threatened to ruin her credit if she kicked him out. I tried to approach Sarah with this information when she got home from work that afternoon, but the conversation went worse than I had feared. "Sarah, we need to talk about Tyler." I began trying to keep my voice calm and concerned rather than accusatory. Her entire body language shifted immediately. She crossed her arms and took a step back, already defensive before I had said anything substantial. "What about Tyler? Are you going to start with the controlling behavior again? I'm worried about you. I did some research, and Tyler has a history that concerns me." "You researched my boyfriend?" Sarah's voice rose in disbelief. "Kirk, that's incredibly invasive and inappropriate. Tyler warned me you might try something like this." The fact that Tyler had predicted my actions and prepared Sarah for this conversation was itself evidence of his manipulation skills. He had been coaching her on how to respond to any concerns I might raise. "Sarah, Tyler has outstanding warrants in Colorado and Nevada for identity theft and fraud. He's been using our address for mail, which is illegal. I found his prescription bottle in our bathroom." Instead of being concerned about this information, Sarah became angry with me for discovering it. "So you've been snooping through our bathroom now? Tyler told me you'd probably start going through his things once you realized he was staying here sometimes. He said people like you can't stand to see others happy." "People like me?" The phrase stung because it meant Tyler had been analyzing my personality and coaching Sarah on how to dismiss my concerns by categorizing me as a type of person whose opinions didn't matter. "This isn't about happiness, Sarah. This is about safety. Tyler is wanted by police in multiple states." And that's impossible. Tyler used to work in law enforcement. He would never do anything illegal. This was news to me and almost certainly a lie. I pulled up the court records on my phone to show Sarah the documentation of Tyler's criminal charges, but she refused to look at them. "I don't care what some website says. I know Tyler personally, and you don't. He's explained his situation to me, and it's not what you think." "What did he tell you?" "That his ex-girlfriend in Colorado was vindictive and filed false charges against him when he broke up with her. That he's fighting the charges through his lawyer, but it takes time to clear up false accusations. Tyler said people like you would probably try to use his legal troubles against him, because you can't stand that he makes me happy." Every response Sarah gave sounded coached and rehearsed. Tyler had provided her with explanations for everything I might discover, and he had framed my predictable concerns as evidence of my character flaws rather than legitimate worries about her safety. "Sarah, even if that were true, why is he using our address for mail? Why didn't you tell me he was staying here?" "Because I knew you'd react exactly like this. Tyler said you'd probably try to sabotage our relationship out of jealousy. He said controlling people can't stand to see their siblings happy and independent." The conversation continued in circles for over an hour, with Sarah deflecting every concern I raised and interpreting every piece of evidence I presented as proof of my jealousy and controlling nature. Tyler had prepared her so thoroughly for this confrontation that she had an answer for everything, and every answer positioned me as the problem. I tried calling our parents for support, thinking they might be able to talk sense into Sarah where I had failed. But when I reached our mother in Arizona, I discovered that Sarah had already spoken to them. "Kirk, honey, Sarah called us yesterday. She's really concerned about your behavior lately. She says you've been going through her boyfriend's things and trying to control who she dates." "Mom, that's not what's happening. Tyler is a criminal who's been exploiting Sarah and using our apartment for illegal activities." "Sweetheart, I know you mean well, but Sarah is an adult. She can make her own choices about who she dates. Maybe you're feeling protective because you two are living together, but you can't control her personal life. Even our parents, who loved both of us, were interpreting the situation through the framework Tyler had provided. Sarah had contacted them, first presented herself as the victim of my controlling behavior, and now any concerns I raised would be filtered through that narrative. I realized that Tyler was more than just a common criminal. He was a psychological predator who specialized in isolating his victims from their support systems by convincing everyone that the victim's protectors were actually the threats. Sarah was trapped in a web of manipulation so sophisticated that she couldn't see it from the inside, and Tyler had successfully portrayed me as the danger in the situation. Any attempt I made to help her would be interpreted as evidence of the controlling behavior Tyler had warned her about. But the most terrifying realization was that Tyler now knew I was investigating him. He would be expecting me to escalate my efforts to expose him, and based on his history with other women, he might become dangerous when he felt cornered. I was no longer just dealing with a food thief or even a con artist. I was dealing with someone who had destroyed multiple women's lives and who was now systematically isolating my sister from everyone who might help her escape his influence. And he was doing it all from my own home, using my address and resources to facilitate his criminal activities, while my sister defended him against my attempts to protect her. By Saturday morning, I realized that conventional approaches to dealing with Tyler weren't going to work. Sarah was too deeply manipulated to listen to reason our parents saw me as the problem, and law enforcement would need more concrete evidence before they could act on outstanding warrants from other states. I was completely alone in this situation, facing a skilled predator who had successfully isolated his victim and portrayed her protector as the threat. But Tyler had made one crucial mistake. He had underestimated my capacity for strategic thinking. If I couldn't expose Tyler through external authorities or family intervention, I would have to create a situation where he exposed himself. I needed Tyler to reveal his true nature in a way that Sarah couldn't ignore or explain away. And I needed to document everything, so there would be no question about what kind of person he really was. I spent the weekend observing Tyler's behavior more carefully, looking for psychological weaknesses I could exploit. During his Saturday evening visit, I pretended to be friendly and welcoming, asking him about his interests and background. Tyler, believing he had successfully neutralized my opposition through Sarah's defense, became surprisingly open about his preferences and habits. You know, Kirk, I'm glad we're getting past that awkward phase," Tyler said, as he helped himself to my leftover Chinese food without asking. "Sarah was really worried you wouldn't accept our relationship." "I was just being overprotective," I replied, swallowing my anger and playing the role of a reformed, apologetic brother. Sarah's happiness is what matters most. Through casual conversation, I learned several important facts about Tyler. He was lactose intolerant, but tried to hide it because he thought it made him seem weak. He had an extreme reaction to spicy foods, but pretended to enjoy them to impress women. He was particularly proud of his sophisticated palate and considered himself a food connoisseur. Most importantly, Tyler was arrogant about his success in manipulating Sarah and dismissive of any threat I might pose. He saw me as weak and easily controlled someone who could be neutralized through basic psychological pressure. "Sarah told me you used to be really uptight about food sharing," Tyler mentioned with a condescending smile. "But I think once people mature a little, they realize that relationships are about generosity and trust, not keeping track of every little thing." His casual dismissal of my legitimate concerns as immaturity was the final insult I needed to fuel my determination. Tyler thought he had won, thought he had successfully portrayed me as a petty, controlling person, while establishing himself as the reasonable adult in the situation. He had no idea that his arrogance was about to become his downfall. On Sunday, I announced that I wanted to cook a special celebration dinner to officially welcome Tyler as part of our household. Sarah was thrilled by this gesture, seeing it as proof that her family was finally accepting her relationship. Tyler graciously agreed to be the guest of honor, suggesting several dishes that would showcase my culinary skills. "I'd love to try your take on pasta Alfredo," Tyler said. "Sarah mentioned you're quite the cook when you put effort into it." "Perfect. Alfredo sauce required massive amounts of heavy cream butter and Parmesan cheese. For someone who was lactose intolerant but hiding it, a large serving of authentic Alfredo would create an unavoidable physical reaction. And maybe something with a little heat, Tyler continued. I love spicy food, the hotter the better. Even better, I could incorporate serious heat into multiple courses while making everything appear mild and approachable. I spent Monday and Tuesday shopping for ingredients and planning my menu with the precision of a military operation. Everything had to look delicious and welcoming while being specifically designed to exploit Tyler's hidden food sensitivities. More importantly, I needed to create a situation where Tyler's reaction would be so severe that his true character would emerge under stress. The menu I designed was diabolical in its simplicity. Appetizer creamy spinach and artichoke dip made with extra heavy cream and cream cheese served with bread for dipping. To Tyler, it would look like a mild, safe starter. In reality, it contained enough dairy to trigger anyone with lactose sensitivity. Main course, fettuccine Alfredo made with real butter, heavy cream, and aged Parmesan, but infused with ghost pepper powder that I carefully incorporated into the sauce base. The cream would mask the initial heat while delivering maximum spice impact. I also prepared garlic bread made with butter mixed with Carolina Reaper hot sauce, disguised with herbs and Parmesan to look like regular garlic butter. Side dish, what appeared to be mild roasted vegetables but actually glazed with a mixture containing concentrated habanero extract and dairy-based sauce. Dessert tiramisu made with extra mascarpone cheese and espresso soaked with ghost pepper extract. The coffee and cocoa would hide the spice until it was too late. Everything looked absolutely delicious and appeared to be mild comfort food. But the combined dairy content would overwhelm anyone with lactose intolerance, while the hidden spice levels would be unbearable for someone with Tyler's sensitivity to heat. I also set up my security cameras to capture every moment of the dinner, and I prepared a backup plan in case Tyler became violent when he realized what was happening. But on Tuesday evening, just as I was finishing my preparations, my phone rang with a call that changed everything. It was Amy, and she was crying. Kirk, something terrible has happened. Someone has been using my identity to open credit cards and bank accounts. My credit score has dropped over 200 points, and there are thousands of dollars in charges I never made. My blood turned to ice. When did you discover this? I got a call from my bank this morning about suspicious activity. When I looked into it, I found out someone has been using my social security number and personal information for months. They even applied for an apartment lease in Seattle using my identity. The timing wasn't coincidental. Tyler had been in my apartment regularly for months, with access to my personal documents and Amy's information from the times she had visited. Through me, he had gained access to another victim. Amy, the person using your identity, did they use the name Tyler Morrison on any of the applications? How did you know that yes, that's the name on the apartment lease and 2 of the credit cards? Kirk, how do you know who did this to me? I realized that my plan for petty revenge had become completely inadequate for the situation I was actually facing. Tyler wasn't just a food thief or even a con artist living off my sister. He was an active identity thief who was using my apartment as a base of operations to commit federal crimes against people I cared about. My silly plan to make him sick with spicy food and dairy was laughably insufficient when he was actually stealing Amy's financial future and potentially destroying her credit for years to come. But I also realized that Tyler's latest crime had given me exactly the evidence I needed to bring in law enforcement and end his exploitation of both Sarah and Amy. The dinner I had planned would still happen, but now it would serve a completely different purpose than simple revenge. Wednesday evening arrived with Tyler in an exceptionally good mood, completely unaware that his latest identity theft victim was my girlfriend, or that I had spent 2 days preparing both a meal and a trap for him. Sarah had dressed up for our celebration dinner, excited about her brother finally accepting her relationship and welcoming Tyler into our family. "This smells incredible, Kirk," Sarah said as she helped me set the table with our best dishes. "I can't believe you went to all this trouble just to welcome Tyler." "Family is important?" I replied carefully, ladling the ghost pepper Alfredo sauce over fresh fettuccine while keeping my expression neutral. "I want Tyler to feel at home here." Tyler arrived precisely at 7, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing the same expensive leather jacket I had seen during my first glimpse of him. He seemed completely relaxed and confident, treating our dinner invitation as confirmation that he had successfully integrated into our household and neutralized any threat I might have posed. "Kirk, I have to say I'm impressed by your maturity in accepting our relationship," Tyler said as he settled into his chair. "Sarah was really worried you'd keep causing problems, but I told her you seemed like a reasonable guy who just needed time to adjust." The condescending tone in his voice made my jaw clench, but I maintained my facade of friendly acceptance. Tyler had no idea that I knew about Amy's identity theft, no idea that I had discovered his criminal history, and no idea that every bite of food I was about to serve him was specifically designed to exploit his hidden vulnerabilities. I was being overprotective. I said, placing a generous serving of the creamy spinach and artichoke dip in front of him. "Sarah's happiness is what matters most to me." Tyler dug into the appetizer with enthusiasm, completely unaware that each bite contained enough dairy to overwhelm someone with lactose sensitivity. The heavy cream and cream cheese were disguised by the spinach and herbs, making the dip taste rich and delicious, while delivering a massive dose of the very ingredient his digestive system couldn't handle. "This is fantastic," Tyler said, spreading more dip on his bread. "You've got real talent in the kitchen, Kirk." Sarah beamed with pride, delighted to see her boyfriend and brother bonding over food. She had no idea that Tyler had been systematically stealing from me for months. No idea that he was wanted by police in multiple states. And no idea that he had just stolen her brother's girlfriend's identity to fund his criminal lifestyle. As Tyler continued eating the appetizer, I served the main course fettuccine Alfredo that looked creamy and mild, but contained enough ghost pepper extract to challenge even someone who genuinely enjoyed spicy food. The dairy in the sauce would initially mask the heat, allowing Tyler to consume several bites before the true intensity became apparent. "Tyler was telling me about his work in law enforcement," Sarah said, as she twirled pasta around her fork. "Maybe you two have more in common than you thought." I nearly choked on my own food. "Law enforcement. That's interesting. What kind of work did you do, Tyler?" "Private security, mostly," Tyler replied smoothly, taking a large bite of the Alfredo. "Corporate investigations, background checks, that sort of thing. It taught me a lot about reading people and understanding their motivations." The irony was staggering. Tyler was claiming expertise in the very field that would eventually catch up with him while sitting at my table eating food designed to expose his deceptions. But as he continued eating, I noticed he hadn't started showing any signs of discomfort from either the dairy or the hidden spice. In fact, Tyler seemed to be enjoying the meal, tremendously complimenting each dish and asking for second helpings. Either his food sensitivities were less severe than I had observed, or he was incredibly good at hiding physical discomfort. After 20 minutes of watching Tyler consume massive quantities of dairy and spice without any visible reaction, I began to worry that my plan was failing completely. But just as I was starting to doubt my intelligence about his food sensitivities, Tyler's phone rang. "Sorry, I need to take this," he said, stepping into our living room for privacy. From the kitchen, Sarah and I could hear only Tyler's side of the conversation, but what we heard was alarming. "Why, it's so kai wa queening. No, I told you use the Seattle address for the credit applications, not the local one," Tyler said, his voice sharp with irritation. "The whole point is to keep them geographically separated so the pattern isn't obvious." Sarah looked confused. "What's he talking about?" My heart started racing as I realized Tyler was discussing his identity theft operation on the phone, apparently unaware that we could hear him clearly from the next room. "Look, the Morrison identity is blown in Colorado, so we're phasing that out," Tyler continued. "But the Johnson documents are still clean, and the Williams identity just got approved for that apartment lease. Multiple identities, multiple ongoing fraud schemes. Tyler wasn't just stealing Amy's identity, he was running a sophisticated operation involving several stolen identities across multiple states." "I don't understand," Sarah whispered. "Why is he talking about different names?" Before I could respond, Tyler's conversation took an even more disturbing turn. "The girlfriend's brother is suspicious, but the girl is completely under control," Tyler said. "She'll defend me no matter what he says or does." Classic emotional manipulation textbook case. Sarah's face went white. Even she couldn't misinterpret what Tyler had just said about her. "She thinks I'm some kind of reformed bad boy who just needs love and understanding," Tyler laughed. "These women make it so easy. A few sob stories about my difficult past, some comments about how her family doesn't understand our connection, and she's ready to fight her own brother to defend me." The phone call continued for several more minutes with Tyler discussing financial fraud, identity theft, and manipulation tactics while Sarah sat frozen at our kitchen table, finally hearing the truth about how her boyfriend really saw her. When Tyler returned to the table, he found Sarah staring at him with tears in her eyes, and me standing with my arms crossed. "Everything okay?" Tyler asked, his casual demeanor completely unchanged. "Tyler, what were you talking about on the phone?" Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. "Just some business stuff, nothing important," Tyler replied, sitting back down and reaching for more pasta, as if nothing had happened. But something had changed in Tyler's behavior. His movements seemed more aggressive, his smile more forced. And finally, nearly 40 minutes after he started eating, the physical effects of my meal began to manifest. Tyler's face started turning red, not from embarrassment about being overheard, but from the cumulative effect of the ghost pepper extract I had been feeding him throughout the meal. The dairy that should have caused digestive distress was actually protecting him somewhat from the spice, but the sheer volume of both ingredients was beginning to overwhelm his system. "Is the food a little warm for anyone else?" Tyler asked, loosening his collar and reaching for his water glass. "It tastes fine to me," Sarah said coldly. "But maybe you should explain what you meant when you told whoever you were talking to that I was completely under control and easy to manipulate." Tyler's expression changed completely. The friendly, charming persona he had maintained throughout dinner vanished, replaced by something calculating and cold. He realized that his phone conversation had been overheard and that his position in our household was no longer secure. "Sarah, you're misunderstanding what you heard," Tyler said, but his voice had lost its warmth. "That was a conversation about work, not about you." "What kind of work involves multiple identities and apartment leases?" I interjected. "What kind of work involves calling your girlfriend's brother suspicious while bragging about manipulating her?" Tyler stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against our floor. The movement seemed to trigger a wave of the physical discomfort he had been suppressing, and he doubled over, slightly clutching his stomach. "Kirk, I don't know what kind of game you're playing here." Tyler said, his voice tight with pain and anger. "But you're making a serious mistake." The threat in his voice was unmistakable, and I realized that my plan to expose Tyler through his phone conversation had worked. But now I was dealing with a cornered predator who had just revealed his true nature to his primary victim. Sarah looked back and forth between Tyler and me, finally beginning to understand that everything I had tried to tell her about Tyler was true, but also realizing that we were now in a potentially dangerous situation with someone who had nothing left to lose. Tyler's transformation from charming boyfriend to threatening criminal happened so quickly that Sarah seemed stunned into silence. The man she had been defending for months, the person she had chosen over her own brother's concerns, was now glaring at both of us with undisguised hostility. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. Tyler said, his voice low and menacing, despite the obvious physical discomfort he was experiencing from my carefully prepared meal. I've destroyed people for less than this. But Tyler's threatening posture was undermined by the fact that he was clearly struggling with the effects of the ghost pepper extract and massive dairy intake. His face was flushed, sweat was beading on his forehead, and he kept clutching his stomach in obvious distress. "Tyler, what are you saying?" Sarah asked, her voice small and frightened. "You're scaring me." Good," Tyler snapped. "Maybe now you'll understand how serious this situation is. Your brother thinks he's clever, but he's just made an enemy he can't handle." I stepped protectively in front of Sarah, realizing that Tyler might become physically violent as his position collapsed. But before the situation could escalate further, we heard a knock at our apartment door. "Kirk, Sarah, it's Amy. I saw the lights on and wanted to talk to you both." Tyler's eyes went wide with panic. "Who is that?" "My girlfriend," I said. "The person whose identity you've been stealing." The color drained from Tyler's face as he realized that his latest victim was standing outside our door, probably with evidence of his crimes and possibly law enforcement backup. "Don't answer it," Tyler said, moving toward the kitchen window that led to the fire escape. "Nobody say anything." But Sarah, who was still processing everything she had overheard during Tyler's phone call, made a decision that surprised everyone. "I'm going to let her in," Sarah announced. "Kirk, Amy deserves to know what's been happening, and Tyler needs to face what he's done." "Sarah, if you open that door, you'll regret it for the rest of your life," Tyler threatened. Instead of cowering, Sarah straightened her shoulders and looked Tyler directly in the eye. "I already regret the last 6 months of my life. The difference is now I'm going to do something about it." Sarah walked to the front door and opened it to reveal Amy standing in the hallway with a tall, uniformed police officer, who I recognized as her older brother Marcus. "Amy, thank God you're here," Sarah said. "We need to tell you everything." Tyler made a desperate attempt to escape through the kitchen window, but the physical effects of my meal had weakened him more than he realized. As he tried to climb through the window onto the fire escape, he stumbled and fell backward into our kitchen, knocking over chairs and clutching his stomach in obvious agony. Tyler Morrison. Officer Marcus said, stepping into our apartment with his hand near his service weapon. "You're under arrest for identity theft, wire fraud, and violation of your parole conditions." "Parole conditions?" Sarah looked confused. "Tyler was supposed to report to a parole officer in Nevada every week," Marcus explained, as he handcuffed Tyler, who was now curled up on our kitchen floor. "He's been violating parole by leaving the state and failing to report his whereabouts. The identity theft charges your girlfriend filed gave us enough evidence to issue a warrant for his arrest." As Marcus read Tyler his rights, the full scope of Tyler's criminal operation became clear. He had been using our apartment as a base for identity theft schemes, targeting multiple victims across several states. The prescription bottle I found was just one piece of evidence in a much larger pattern of mail fraud, document forgery, and financial crimes. "Sarah, I need you to know that Tyler stole over $8,000 using Amy's identity," Marcus continued. "There may be other victims we don't know about yet. We'll need statements from both of you about his activities while living here." Sarah broke down completely sobbing as she realized how thoroughly she had been manipulated and how her defense of Tyler had nearly cost her brother his job, his apartment, and his relationship. "Kirk, I'm so sorry," Sarah cried. "I should have listened to you. I should have seen what he was doing." I put my arms around my sister, feeling a mixture of relief that the danger was over and guilt that my focus on petty food revenge had nearly distracted me from the serious crimes Tyler was committing against people I loved. "Sarah, you were a victim too," I said. Tyler specialized in manipulation. He knew exactly how to make you doubt everyone who tried to warn you. Amy joined our embrace, and for the first time in months, I felt like my family was safe and whole again. Over the following weeks, the legal process revealed the full extent of Tyler's criminal enterprise. He had been running identity theft schemes for over 3 years, targeting women in stable financial situations and using their homes as bases of operation. The FBI found evidence linking him to fraud totaling over $200,000 across 7 states. Sarah testified against Tyler, finding strength she never knew she possessed. The process was difficult for her, but she said it helped her understand how manipulation worked and how to recognize the warning signs in future relationships. "I kept thinking I was defending love," Sarah told me during one of our long conversations as she worked through her trauma. "But I was really defending someone who saw me as a resource to exploit. The scariest part is how good he was at making me doubt my own judgment." Amy's identity theft case was resolved when Tyler pled guilty to federal charges. She recovered most of her stolen money, and her credit score began recovering once the fraudulent accounts were removed from her record. "I'm just grateful you figured out it was him before he could do more damage," Amy said. "If you hadn't been investigating Tyler for your own reasons, he might have been able to steal my identity for years without anyone connecting it back to him." Sarah and I developed a completely different relationship in the aftermath of Tyler's arrest. We started having weekly check-ins where we talked honestly about our lives, our struggles, and our concerns about each other. Sarah began therapy to work through the psychological damage Tyler had inflicted, and I learned better ways to express concern without seeming controlling. "I realize now that when you were trying to warn me about Tyler, you were protecting me," Sarah said during one of our conversations. But Tyler had trained me to interpret protection as control. He convinced me that anyone who questioned our relationship was trying to sabotage my happiness. 6 months after Tyler's arrest, Sarah and I moved to a new apartment together, this time as equal partners who contributed fairly to expenses and communicated openly about problems. Sarah had found a better-paying position at a different dental office, and she was thriving in her dental hygiene program. I had been promoted to shift supervisor at Henderson Logistics partly because my work performance improved dramatically once the stress of living with Tyler's criminal activities was removed from my life. My freelance graphic design work was growing into a legitimate side business, and Amy and I were discussing moving in together once our lease was up. "You know what's funny?" Sarah said as we cooked dinner together in our new kitchen, both of us contributing ingredients we had purchased and planned together. "I actually learned to cook properly because I wanted to make up for all those months of stealing your food." We laughed about it now, but Sarah's cooking had indeed improved dramatically. More importantly, she had developed genuine appreciation for the planning and effort that went into preparing meals, something she had never understood when she was taking my food for granted. "I still feel terrible about how I treated you during those months," Sarah continued. "You were working so hard to support both of us, and I was not only stealing from you but making you feel crazy for trying to protect your own property." "The important thing is that we got through it," I replied. "And we're stronger now because we learned to communicate honestly instead of letting resentment build up." Amy often joined us for dinner in our new apartment, and she and Sarah had developed a genuine friendship based on their shared experience of being targeted by Tyler. They even started a support group for women who had been victims of financial predators, using their experience to help others recognize and escape similar situations. "Tyler taught me something valuable, even though he didn't mean to," Sarah reflected during one of our family dinners. "He showed me the difference between someone who supports you and someone who uses you. Support feels empowering, like you're becoming stronger and more capable. Being used feels isolating, like you're becoming weaker and more dependent." As I looked around our dinner table that evening, sharing a meal that we had all contributed to and prepared together, I realized how much we had all grown from the experience. My initial impulse for petty revenge against Sarah's food theft had evolved into a deeper understanding of family trust and protection. The most important lesson I learned was that sometimes what looks like betrayal is actually someone crying out for help. Sarah's food theft had been annoying and disrespectful, but it was also a symptom of her vulnerability to Tyler's manipulation. By focusing on protecting her rather than punishing her, I had been able to save her from a dangerous situation and strengthen our relationship. Tyler was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for identity theft and fraud. The judge noted that his systematic targeting of vulnerable women and his sophisticated manipulation techniques demonstrated a level of premeditation that warranted the maximum sentence under federal guidelines. Sarah attended his sentencing hearing not to support Tyler, but to face her own experience with manipulation and find closure. Seeing him in handcuffs and prison clothes made me realize how completely I had been fooled, Sarah told me afterward. The charming, caring person I thought I was dating never actually existed. Tyler was always a predator, and I was always his target. 1 year after Tyler's arrest, Sarah graduated from her dental hygiene program with honors. Amy and I moved in together, and our relationship was stronger than ever because we had weathered a serious crisis together. I had paid off over half of my student loans and was considering starting my own graphic design business. Most importantly, Sarah and I had learned to be genuine partners in each other's lives. We supported each other's goals, communicated honestly about problems, and trusted each other's judgment about potential threats. "I have a confession to make," Sarah said, as we celebrated her graduation with a dinner she had cooked entirely herself. "Sometimes I still can't believe you went to all that trouble to make Tyler that special meal just to expose him. The ghost pepper Alfredo was diabolical." "Actually, the meal wasn't what exposed him," I admitted. "It was his own arrogance. He got so comfortable thinking he had won that he discussed his criminal activities on the phone, where we could hear him. The spicy food was just my petty revenge fantasy." "Well, your petty revenge fantasy probably saved my life," Sarah said. "If Tyler hadn't revealed his true character that night, he might have continued manipulating me for years while destroying other people's lives." We raised our glasses in a toast to family, to honest communication, and to the power of protecting each other instead of competing with each other. "Here's to special meals," Sarah said with a smile, "and to siblings who care enough to cook them." Looking back on that difficult year, I realized that the most effective revenge against people who try to divide families is choosing to understand and support each other instead. Tyler's plan had been to isolate Sarah from everyone who might protect her. But in the end, our family bond proved stronger than his manipulation. The food Tyler stole was replaceable. The trust he tried to destroy was not. But by choosing protection over punishment and understanding over anger, Sarah and I had built something Tyler could never touch: a relationship based on genuine care rather than exploitation. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to let someone destroy what you value most. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with someone who tried to come between you and your family? How did you handle a situation where someone you cared about was being manipulated or taken advantage of? Share your experiences in the comments below, and let's support each other in protecting the people we love. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that family bonds can survive even the most challenging tests when we choose understanding over judgment and protection over pride. Please like this video. If it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming difficult family situations, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's possible to rebuild trust after betrayal. Remember, the strongest revenge against those who try to divide us is choosing to stand together instead.